By midday, I had enough to justify probable cause. But I waited, because I knew Karen, and she wasn't done playing her game. Sure enough, that Friday, flyers appeared on every mailbox. An emergency home meeting. No explanation, just the ominous message, community preservation concern, attendance required. So I went. This time, I wore my uniform. Let them see the badge under full daylight. The community clubhouse was packed, every folding chair taken. People lined the walls. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand, flanked by Greg and Traviza, who now wore a bandage on his temple, purely for dramatic effect. Karen cleared her throat. "Neighbors," she said solemnly, "we're facing a serious challenge." She paused, letting the tension rise. "There are individuals in this community who want to divide us, spread misinformation, disrupt the harmony we've worked so hard to build." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eyes flicked toward me. "She calls herself a protector," Karen continued, shooting a venomous glance my way. "But she's invaded our private files, intimidated your board, even harassed our children." I raised an eyebrow. Bold of her to say, considering the truth. "She's not here to help," Karen said as she stepped to the edge of the stage. "She's here to destroy everything we've built." Murmurs began rising. Doubt, confusion, concern. That's when I stood up and said just one word: receipts. Every head in the room turned. I held up a thick folder, color-coded, labeled, neatly organized. On the front, bank transfers, video evidence, home misconduct, complaints, permit denials, illegitimate fines. I walked slowly down the center aisle of the clubhouse, the folder in my hand thick with evidence. Every single one of these transactions was authorized by either Karen or Greg, I said, projecting my voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. Karen's mouth opened, trying to form words. That's not officially you can't." I turned to the crowd. "You've been manipulated, lied to, intimidated, not by me, by them." Then I locked eyes with Travis. "And your son? He broke the law." Karen's face lost all color. Greg stood abruptly, voice shaking. "This is slander." I stepped right up to them, folder still in hand. "Then sue me." With that, I placed the folder on the podium and walked toward the exit. But before I could step outside, a crash. A brick shattered the glass door beside me. Screams echoed from the room. Travis's voice rang out from behind the chaos. "That'll teach you, you old witch." He bolted. But he didn't get far. One of my deputies, waiting near the parking lot, sprinted after him. Travis barely made it 10 feet past the hydrangeas before he was slammed to the ground and cuffed. Karen shrieked. Greg turned pale as paper. The meeting dissolved into panic, shouting, cell phones out, people stunned, others just standing in disbelief. I stood still, watching the empire they'd built collapse in front of everyone. Because now, it wasn't just neighborhood drama. This was a criminal investigation, and someone was going to jail. Police cruisers filled the parking lot, red and blue lights flashing across the fading sky. Travis sat sulking in the back of one, wrists bound in cuffs. Neighbors crowded around, murmuring, questioning, stunned. Karen stood frozen, her gaze on the pavement. Greg was off to the side, furiously typing on his phone. Some people looked heartbroken, others looked relieved. I crossed my arms and watched. A few days ago, I was just the woman whose groceries were nearly stolen. Now, I was watching the HOA president's son hauled off by law enforcement. One of my deputies walked over. "Chief, we've got him for felony vandalism, attempted theft, and threats." "Witness statements are coming in too." "Good," I said. "Make sure to talk to everyone. Some of them saw more than they're letting on." He glanced over at the crowd. "People are nervous. They've been bullied into silence," I said. "But that ends now." As his radio crackled and pulled him away, I approached a few neighbors who seemed ready finally to speak. Mrs. Delgado walked up, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Rachel. We needed someone strong." I was too scared to speak up before, but not anymore. Jason nodded beside her. "This neighborhood deserves better. It's time for a new beginning." That night, I returned home with a full heart and a heavy mind. The air in the neighborhood had shifted and uncertainty still lingered, but there was hope now. The next morning, my phone rang. It was the city attorney's office. They wanted to meet urgently to discuss the HOA's finances and the potential legal fallout. Things were moving quickly now. Later that afternoon, While out walking my dog, Max, something strange caught my attention. A black SUV was parked across the street, windows tinted, no visible plates. Two men sat inside, watching my house. A chill ran down my spine. Was this connected to the threats, the pressure mounting around this case? I snapped a photo and sent it immediately to a trusted contact in the department. That evening, there was a knock at my door. It was Karen. Her expression was a mix of apology and confrontation. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I hesitated, then let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch like it might bite her. "I didn't want things to go this far," she began. "My family. We've made mistakes, but you don't understand the pressure I've been under." I listened. Calm, measured. She spoke of financial missteps, throwing Greg under the bus for most of them. She claimed she was trying to keep the neighborhood together but lost control. I gave her a simple truth. If you want redemption, it starts with honesty. Fix what you've broken. Apologize to the people you've hurt. She nodded slowly. I don't know if they'll forgive me." Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face turned white. "It's Greg," she whispered. "He's threatening to reveal everything unless I get you to back off." I stood up, calm but resolute. "Karen, it's time to decide who you're loyal to, the truth or your lies." Her head dropped, tears forming in her eyes. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at the folder of evidence in front of me. This wasn't about HOA fines or personal vendettas anymore. This was about justice, community, rebuilding something worth protecting. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was Greg. "Meet me at the park," he said. 1 hour, alone. His voice was tense, low. I knew it was a trap, but I was ready, because this wasn't over. Not yet. The park was quiet when I arrived. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the path. Greg was already there, pacing near the old swing set. When he saw me, he stopped and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Thanks for coming," he said in a hushed tone. I didn't sit, didn't smile, cut the act. "Greg, what do you want?" He hesitated, then exhaled hard. "Look, a broken bar. Karen's been pushing hard, sure, but she's not the only one involved," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. I narrowed my eyes. "What exactly are you saying?" He looked around cautiously, then leaned in. "Money's been vanishing for years. Not just from fines or those so-called special funds, donations, event budgets, even maintenance allocations. It's all been siphoned off bit by bit." My jaw tightened. "Then why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because I was scared," he admitted, eyes filled with regret. "Karen. She can be vicious. If you cross her, your life becomes hell." I thought I could fix things quietly, but that's no longer an option. I reached for my phone. "Do you have proof?" He nodded, pulling a small USB drive from his jacket. "This has it all: spreadsheets, emails, bank transfers, you name it, enough to expose everything." I took the drive from him and felt the weight of what it meant. "Thank you," I said quietly. His voice cracked. "There's more. Travis isn't acting alone. Karen has a group of loyal followers in the neighborhood. They'll do whatever it takes to hold on to power." I wasn't surprised. I'd long suspected she had Eliasa residents who benefited from the silence, who feared change. "Keep your head down," I warned him. "Let me take it from here." He gave a nervous nod. "I just want to help." "We all do." In the days that followed, I partnered with the city attorney and local law enforcement. We launched a formal audit of the HOA's finances and began speaking with residents. As Karen scrambled to regain support, her grip weakened. Her usual tactics of fear and manipulation no longer worked. More and more neighbors came forward, ready to speak out, finally tired of the intimidation. Community meetings became heated. People demanded truth, demanded reform. Then one evening, I found an envelope pushed under my front door. No name, no details, just 3 words: "Watch your back." The war was far from over, but something had shifted. The neighborhood was finally waking up. The next morning, I hosted a community forum at the park. Dozens came, anxious, emotional, and hopeful. Stories were shared. Tears were shed. It was raw, honest, and long overdue. Karen didn't show up. Her absence spoke volumes. That afternoon, her lawyer called me. "She's considering stepping down." and returning the money she misused. It was a start, but it wasn't the end. Later that night, I got a call I wasn't expecting. It was Travis. His voice trembled. "My mom's in trouble. Someone's after her. I don't want to go to jail. Please, I'll tell the truth." I listened as he poured out everything: a guilt, fear, a need for redemption. That was the moment I realized, sometimes the ones who've done the most damage are the ones most desperate to be saved. And sometimes, mercy can be more powerful than punishment. The next morning, I met Travis at the police station. He looked different, small, pale, nothing like the cocky teen who had once tried to steal my groceries. "I want to come clean," he said, barely above a whisper. "Everything of the money, the threats, all of it." I nodded. "The truth is the only path forward." His confession confirmed what we feared. Karen and Greg had orchestrated years of corruption, covering it up through fear and manipulation. Travis admitted to helping hide transactions and to threatening anyone who asked too many questions. With his testimony, we moved forward with criminal charges. The community stood behind the effort. Weekly meetings now overflowed with residents demanding transparency. We worked with city leaders to create a brand new HOA board, one rooted in integrity. But just when I thought the worst was behind us, I stumbled upon something new. While reviewing documents at home one evening, I noticed several questionable payments made to a contractor who had close ties to Karen. I called Marcus, my most trusted detective. "Look into this contractor. See if there's a kickback scheme or false invoicing." He got to work right away. Meanwhile, Karen's desperation turned dark. I started receiving anonymous threats. My car tires were slashed. Someone tried hacking into my emails. But I didn't flinch. The night before the big HOA vote, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice was distorted, menacing. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." The next day, the neighborhood voted loud and clear. Karen and Greg were officially removed from their positions. The new board was formed, with the community's full support. Then Marcus called. The contractor, deep in a kickback scheme. More arrests were on the horizon. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Karen, Greg, or even this neighborhood. It was about every voice that had been silenced by greed and fear. And little by little, justice was being restored. But just when it seemed like things might finally settle, a massive explosion ripped through the clubhouse. Flames rose high into the evening sky, smoke choking the air, neighbors screaming in shock and horror. I ran toward the chaos, the ground trembling beneath my feet. This was no accident. The battle for Willow Oak Lane had turned deadly. Neighbors rushed to the burning building. Some cried, others shouted, fear spreading like the fire itself. Years of community events, memories, and crucial records all going up in flames. The air was thick with smoke. My lungs burned, but I kept moving, desperate to ensure no one was inside. Fire crews arrived quickly, but the destruction was already immense. As I coordinated with the fire chief, a crowd gathered behind me, some in disbelief, others demanding answers. All the progress we'd made, the fragile trust we were rebuilding, it had been torn apart in an instant. Then, at the edge of the crowd, I saw her, Karen. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her face a mask of heartbreak. And something else, guilt, grief. It was hard to tell, or maybe it was something even more sinister. Greg had vanished. Investigators soon confirmed what many feared: arson. The fire was no accident. Someone had intentionally set it, aiming to destroy evidence and send a chilling warning to the rest of us: stop digging, or pay the price. But instead of breaking us, it ignited something stronger: our resolve. The next morning, I called for an emergency meeting at a nearby church. The turnout was overwhelming. People packed the pews, shoulder to shoulder. Grief clung to the air, but so did determination. I stood before them and spoke plainly, from the heart. We will not be bullied into silence. We will rebuild, and not just buildings, but trust, hope, and unity. This fire was more than an attack on property, it was an attack on our spirit. And we will not let fear win. Applause echoed through the room. By that evening, neighbors were organizing cleanup crews. Volunteers worked side by side, clearing rubble and salvaging what they could. Support flowed in from neighboring communities: supplies, funds, and words of encouragement. The new HOA board wasted no time. Plans were drafted not in secret, but in open forums, with every voice given space to be heard. And Travis haunted, but trying to make things right, it came forward once more. This time, the evidence he provided led to Greg's arrest and exposed even more layers of corruption. Under the weight of mounting proof and public pressure, Karen finally broke. She pled guilty to several charges and agreed to repay the stolen funds. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. In the weeks that followed, Willow Oak Lane changed in ways none of us expected. The clubhouse rose again, modern, welcoming, and transparent in every step of its construction. Community gardens sprang to life. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now shared morning walks, coffee chats, and laughter. As I looked back on everything we had faced, from threats and lies to fire and fear, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about corruption or leadership. It was about courage, compassion, the power of standing together even when it's hard. And me, I was no longer just the police chief. I had become a neighbor, a friend, part of something real. Because sometimes, the greatest strength doesn't come from authority or force. It comes from truth, kindness, and a community that refuses to be broken. Drop those bags. Now, the voice was sharp, cutting through the stillness of the late afternoon like a razor. I stood motionless at the trunk of my car, hands gripping the grocery bags, eyes locked on the figure before me. Not a boy exactly, more like a teenage tyrant looming on my front walkway with all the arrogance of someone who thought the world owed him something. He wore that familiar Oka cap turned backward, a loud hoodie hanging off his lanky frame, jeans sagging, phone raised and already recording. Behind him, 3 others, all wearing the same smirk. "You deaf, old lady?" he barked louder, making sure his camera caught every word. "My mom's hosting the spring party. We need those snacks. Hand him over." I tightened my grip. The steaks were for my dinner, the sodas for the precinct's barbecue tomorrow, the cake mix for my goddaughter's birthday, and this brat wanted to claim it all like some sort of suburban bandit. He took a step forward. "Unless you want me reporting you for not cooperating with a neighborhood request." The nerve of him. He didn't know he had no clue who I was. I kept my stance calm, spine straight. "Son," I said evenly, "walk away before this ends badly for you." He laughed, loud and cocky. "You threatening me, Grandma?" His camera zoomed in, trying to catch my reaction. That's all he wanted, something viral, something to boost his clout. I glanced at his friends. One had already lifted a case of water from my trunk, and then just for a split second my badge, tucked into the waistband of my jeans, caught a glint of sunlight. He didn't notice. "Not yet." I leaned in just slightly and whispered, "You have 10 seconds to return that and leave my property." His expression tightened. The seconds ticked by, then he lunged for another baga, and that's when my hand instinctively went to my waist. But what happened next would change everything in our neighborhood. Let me tell you how it all started. I'm Rachel Monroe, 54 years old, 27 years in law enforcement. For the past 6 years, I've been the police chief of Springdale County, divorced, no kids, and I live alone in a cozy 2-story craftsman-style home on Willow Oak Lane. I moved here to enjoy some quiet, to do a little gardening, maybe adopt a rescue dog. But peace is a rare thing when Karen lives across the street. You know the type, hair always pinned in a bun so tight it must keep her thoughts in line. Always in some overly cheerful cardigan. Clipboard never leaves her chest. 3 years running as the HOA president, and no one dares challenge her. The last guy who did, she slapped him with a fine over unauthorized lawn decor and no less. Karen watches the whole neighborhood through her lace curtains or from her porch swing, and if she's not watching, one of her walking club ladies is. And then there's her son Travis, 18 going on 40, in attitude. Loud, entitled, convinced he's invincible because his mother rules the HOA. I kept my distance. Always have. But then Travis and his little gang started causing real trouble, borrowing tools and never returning them, riding their bikes through neighbors' gardens, throwing late-night pool parties in homes that weren't even theirs. No one said a word. Why? Because Karen would sweep it under the rug. "Boys will be boys," she'd say. "We're a community." But I didn't move here to babysit someone else's kid. 2 weeks ago, I caught Travis tagging the sidewalk with spray paint. I shouted for him to stop, but he flipped me off and sped away on his bike. The next morning, Karen showed up with a warning notice for unauthorized pest control practices in my garden. That's how our war began. I tried to stay composed, but things escalated. Music blaring at night, my mail disappearing, someone's dog dug up my garden beds. Karen claimed it wasn't theirs, even as the same dog barked behind her feet. Still, I kept calm. Kindness is strength. Until today. That Saturday, I'd just trapped a tough shift. We found a missing child safe, thankfully, but I hadn't eaten all day. I stopped at the store, picked up a few things, and just wanted to unwind. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, there they were, Travis and his crew. At first, I thought maybe they were just hanging around. But as soon as I opened the trunk, he approached me like a prince demanding tribute. "You live alone," he said, staring at my bags. "You don't need all this food." That line stuck with me. Who does he think he is? I didn't flash my badge right away. I believe in warnings. In chances. "Back off," I said again. He didn't. Instead, one of his friends grabbed the soda. And that's when the rage bubbled up. Before I could act, a glass bottle slipped and shattered on the driveway. Root beer foamed across the concrete. "You gonna cry, lady?" he sneered. Enough. I pulled out my badge and flipped it open. The smirk vanished. One of his friends dropped the chips in panic. I stared straight at Travis. "Travis Myers, you are trespassing and interfering with private property. What you've just done qualifies as a criminal act." His eyes widened. "You're a cop?" he stammered. "No," I said, stepping forward. "I'm your police chief." He took a step back, clearly rattled. But before I could say more, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Karen, storming across the street, clipboard in hand, arms flailing like an emergency beacon, shouting loud enough to scatter birds from the trees. "Rachel, what are you doing to my son?" And then everything changed, because Travis spun toward her and said the one thing that could flip the narrative. "She assaulted me. She threatened me with a weapon." I froze. Karen's eyes lit up, and just like that, she called 911 on me. "Help." Karen spoke urgently into her phone. "There's a dangerous woman threatening my son. She's armed and has a badge." I stood there, stunned. Right on my own front lawn, I was being framed. Not just an ho squabble anymore. This had turned into a full-on ambush, and I could already hear sirens in the distance. I knew what to do. First step, hands visible. I raised them calmly where any approaching officer could see them. I'd taught that protocol for years. In under 4 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived, lights flashing, tires crunching over the driveway. Curtains fluttered across the street as neighbors peeked out. A few even stepped outside, phones out, ready to catch drama like it was a reality show premiere. Travis, the same teen who tried to lift my groceries, had now transformed into a wounded victim. He held his side, limping toward the officers like he'd taken a blow. "She hit me," he shouted. "She pulled a badge and threatened to shoot me over some snacks." Karen clutched him dramatically, tears springing to her eyes. Crocodile tears. I knew them well. "I warned you, she's been unstable since she moved here," she whispered loudly enough for the bystanders to hear. "Ma'am, step back," said Officer Dalton, a fresh recruit barely out of academy training. He didn't recognize me right away, but his partner, Sergeant Keller, did. The moment his eyes landed on me, his expression shifted. "Chief Monroe?" he asked, clearly thrown. "What's happening here?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Karen jumped in, all flustered and fake shock. "Chief, you're telling me she's the police chief?" "That's a lie. She's pretending to be someone she's not." Keller ignored her and turned back to me. "Chief, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "These kids attempted to steal from my vehicle. When I tried to stop them, Travis fabricated an assault." Karen escalated the situation by making a false report to 911. Karen's face went crimson. Officer Dalton glanced between the three of us, visibly unsure, but Travis doubled down. "She had a weapon." "She pulled something from her waistband." I felt threatened. He blurted. Karen immediately backed him up. "Yes, I saw it too. It was big and black. Very threatening." Now the neighbors were in full attendance. Mr. Benson from 2 doors down, the young couple across the street, even old Mrs. Whitley rolled up in her wheelchair, most of them filming, all of them looking less than convinced. "All right, everyone, Give us some space, Keller called out, lifting a hand. Then he turned to me again. Chief, for protocol, may I inspect your badge and firearm? I nodded and carefully reached for both. Keller checked them, then returned them to me with respect. You're clear, he confirmed. Meanwhile, Dalton pulled Travis aside. Which side did she hit you on? My left, Travis said instantly. Dalton nodded slowly. And the weapon, where'd she draw it from? Also the left. Dalton raised an eyebrow. So she hit you and pulled a weapon from the same side, while holding grocery bags? Travis hesitated. You had broken bar. Then Dalton turned to Karen. And you witnessed this? Karen nodded like a bobblehead. Yes, it was you a very large black gun. I was terrified. You could see it on Dalton's face. The story was unraveling. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth has a way of standing on its own. Then Keller stepped in again. Ma'am, are you aware you just made a false allegation against a sworn officer? Karen's jaw practically hit the lawn. What? Are you seriously taking her side? She's deceiving you. Travis began to crumble under pressure. I didn't mean to lie, he stammered. I just wanted her to stop. Keller's tone shifted. You're obstructing an investigation. That's a serious offense. Before Karen could argue further, a voice rose from the crowd. She's not lying. I saw it all. It was Tanya, quiet, respectful Tanya, just 16, standing beside his mother. In his hand, his phone. I recorded the whole thing. Travis tried to steal her groceries. She never touched him, never even raised her voice. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Karen scoffed. That video could be doctored. Tony's mother stepped forward. Don't insult my son's integrity. Keller took the phone and reviewed the footage. It was all there. Travis grabbing at my bags, the bottle smashing, his mocking tone, my calm response, the badge flash, my steady warning. Keller gave Dalton a small nod. Dalton approached Karen and Travis. Ma'am, we're going to need a formal statement. Possibly downtown. Karen gasped. What? Dalton continued. And your son may face a citation for attempted theft and filing a false report, depending on the evidence. Travis's smug expression disappeared like smoke in the wind. Karen's hands tightened on her clipboard like she was holding on to her title for dear life. But it wasn't over. Just as the officers began wrapping things up, someone else stepped forward from the crowd. Greg Harmon, Karen's second in command in the HOA. He looked like he'd just sprinted from a sauna, sweating under his too large sun hat. Wait, Greg panted, waving a manila folder in the air. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Rachel, let's handle this. Neighbor to neighbor. Now I was really suspicious. Why was Greg suddenly so eager to smooth things over? Keller stepped in, narrowing his eyes. Sir, are you involved in this incident? No, Greg stammered. I'm not involved, but as vice president of the HOA, I'd really like to de-escalate this situation. He gestured broadly, trying to sound diplomatic. This was just a misunderstanding. Let's not turn it into something bigger. Let's drop the charges and move on. He looked straight at me, his voice almost pleading. That's when something clicked. He wasn't trying to protect Travis. His concern was elsewhere. He was covering something up. I tilted my head. Why are you so eager to make this disappear, Greg? His face twitched, and in that moment, I saw Karen shoot him a warning glance. Quick, sharp, and loaded with meaning. Something was going on, something they didn't want surfacing. I'd just spotted the first crack in the wall. This wasn't about a few stolen groceries anymore. This was about secrets, possibly crimes, and I intended to find out exactly what they were hiding. Sergeant Keller had just begun drafting the report when Karen snapped. This is a targeted attack on our HOA. It's a setup. She's trying to tear down our leadership. I turned to her slowly. Maybe I am, I said, because now, I'm officially in this, and I'm not coming alone. After the officers cleared out and the patrol cars disappeared, the neighborhood buzzed with speculation. The HOA queen's veneer had cracked, and her golden boy had nearly landed in cuffs. But I knew this was only the opening act. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, replaying every second of the encounter in my mind. The look Karen and Greg shared had lasted less than a second, but the fear was unmistakable. This wasn't about embarrassment or neighborhood drama. They were terrified of what I might uncover. So, I started digging. The next morning, I took a stroll in not to enjoy the weather, but to knock on some very specific doors. I visited 3 neighbors I knew had clashed with Karen in the past, people she'd penalized, intimidated, or silenced. First, Mrs. Delgado. She'd been hit with a $200 fine for repainting her shutters, but she showed me her approval form, date stamped and signed. Then Jason, a single father, said he was cited for oil stains in his driveway exactly 1 day after Karen's son smashed a soda bottle near his garage. He paid the fine quickly, worried they'd ban his daughter from the community center she loved. Finally, Sharona, quiet, retired, always polite, she told me Karen hit her with a $500 fine for flower bed non-compliance right after Sharon refused to vote for her in the last HOA election. Each of them had receipts, checks made out to something called the Special Improvement Fund, but when I checked the HOA's official records easily accessible through public community channels, there was no mention of such a fund. It didn't exist, not on paper, yet every check had cleared. Someone was skimming money off the top, and based on what I'd seen, that someone was Karen. The next day, I headed to City Hall with a black coffee in one hand and my badge credentials in the other. I signed in and began pulling records going back 5 years of permit applications, budget breakdowns, fine collections, and complaint logs. It took about 2 hours for the pattern to emerge. The money from these shady fines was being funneled into a P.O. box, not the HOA's registered mailing address. This one was across town. The box was registered to none other than Gregory Harmona, Karen's right-hand man. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about intimidation or power plays. This was financial fraud. Thousands of dollars siphoned from seniors, single parents, and young couples, all out of fear, all cloaked under community rules. They weren't just bullies, they were criminals. Later that evening, I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door. No return address, just my name typed on the front, Rachel. Inside was a single sheet of paper, block letters glaring. Drop this or else. I stared at the note for a moment, then calmly walked inside, set it on the kitchen table, and activated every layer of my home security system. They wanted me shaken, but fear wasn't something I wore easily. The next morning, I filed a confidential inquiry with the local attorney's office. Not a full-scale investigation yet. I needed every fact in place, every detail ironclad. This needed to be airtight.